Okay, I'm back today with Joseph Caplan, the author of The Money Man, and this is just a continuation of our informal series, questions and answers. And so, Joseph, what are we going to talk about today?
Thanks, Lynn. It's great working with you. And well, I'd like to move on with the story today. I mean, all the stories are in The Money Man, but for this purpose, I remember we told the folk that I had been a practicing barrister at law in London at the famous law courts, the Old Bailey, and I loved it. The wig and the gown and all of that, and that was my dream, my career. I came from a working class family, and they didn't imagine that I was going to be at that end of the legal profession, but I was. And then one day I had that terrible phone call from my mum to tell me that Dad was in hospital, and I had no choice. There was no one to look after his business, and although it was a small business, but that's where they got their income from, their livelihood from. So anyway, I hung up my wig and my gown, and I told the man who runs the offices, which are called chambers, if you're a barrister, and I left it and went into the rag trade. It was going like from heaven to hell from my point of view. I was a very young man, and the atmosphere was completely different. You know, and I'm not exaggerating. You may laugh at me, but I mean, it was a very ordinary place where he bought and sold old rags, and there were rats running backwards and forwards all the time, which is no big deal, but it was a bit of a shock for me. Anyway, the time came, and it took a long time. In those days, they didn't have the medical knowledge to know what to do with somebody who was ill with a heart problem. So it took a very long time. But Dad came back, and you know, he's my father. I'm his son. No other children. But the fact remains is we didn't agree about anything. I was a different generation. He had paid for me to be educated, and there I was, having been through college and law school and all the rest of it, and suddenly I'm trying to introduce new ideas into his business, and he didn't want it, and that's fine. So I knew someone, his name was Sidney Keston, a much older man, but he had a small Christmas club. Now, what was a Christmas club? It's just simply a place, and they still exist today, where people save up a certain amount of money with someone every week so that when Christmas comes, they get their money back with a tiny bit of interest, and in that interest, they are able, with that interest and their money back, they're able to buy Christmas presents for the kids, and that's fine. And it appealed to me because I could see that there are so many people who would want to do that, and I teamed up with him, and he was a fabulous guy. I mean, he was, you know, if I had any opportunity to work with him today, I would do it if I could, because he was highly respected by everybody, and he only had about 20 or 30 Christmas club clients. We began to work together. We worked day, we worked night. We went to this house and this office and that office, and as time went by, the 30 or so people turned into 100, and then into 200, and then years later, say about 5 years later, I turned it into a finance company, and 10 years after that, it was on the London Stock Exchange. It was highly successful. It employed many people, and we had property and companies. We had a total of 86 companies at one point. So it grew and grew, and I had become a very wealthy man. So I'm going to have to break off from this story in a minute because the clock's running out. but I'll continue it on the next segment.